Welcome back to the Deeply Rested podcast. Today, I am talking to my friend, colleague, and previous private mentorship client, Lori Cangilla. Lori has some paradigm-shifting ideas about busyness, and in particular, she believes that it is absolutely possible to be deeply rested and chaotically busy if you're busy in the right way for the right things, if that makes sense. Lori's ideas on the topic of busyness have really helped me shift the way I think about my to-do list in my own life. She's helped me become more values-aligned and intentional about the way that I use my time, and she's helped me see that it is possible to do everything that I want to do while still taking really good care of myself. So I'm very excited to share this conversation with you today. And just to give you a little more information about Lori, she is an author, coach, and licensed psychologist who helps sensitive, bright, creative idealists figure out how to change the world without selling out or burning out. She has a PhD in counseling psychology and a master's degree in community counseling, and she based her proprietary approach, Singularly Sensitive, on her work with clients in her private practice based out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Lori's book, Wander and Delve, has empowered readers on 6 different continents, and she is a frequent media contributor and podcast guest. Also, she publishes her writing on the Singularly Sensitive newsletter on Substack, which I highly recommend checking out. Okay, if you're ready to listen to a fantastic conversation about busyness, this is for you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Lori Cangilla. Welcome to Deeply Rested, the podcast that helps people doing good work in the world take incredibly good care of themselves. I'm your host, retired therapist and disillusioned business coach, Maegan Megginson. I'm on a mission to help people like you unlearn the rules that keep you trapped in self-doubt so that you can recover from burnout and finally become deeply rested. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and join our weekly newsletter at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. Now, it's time for the show. Hi, Lori. Welcome to the podcast.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled to have you. It's such an honor, and I'm very excited for a juicy conversation today about being busy. And specifically, what you're bringing to the conversation is this idea that we can actually be deeply rested and busy at the same time.
I cannot wait to share with you because I think that has been revolutionary for me. To be busy in the right ways is restful in and of itself.
Whew, to be busy in the right ways. Okay. I'm very excited. But before we dive into busyness, I want to talk for just a moment about how you and I found our way to this particular conversation. So for those of you listening, Lori and I worked together earlier this year. Lori was a mentorship client of mine. And a big part of what we explored in our work together was how you, Lori, could kind of shake free from the really restrictive, parameters that you had to operate inside of as a licensed psychologist. So you were feeling like really constricted and you really wanted a platform, a place to share your ideas more authentically, more freely. Can you just tell us a little bit about that struggle?
Yeah, I mean, for good reason. Psychologists are really constrained to certain kinds of activities, and we have to keep a really neutral, narrow voice in what we talk about. And I think that's all really important for clinical work, but I think it's hard for me to live in that space. It's hard for me to just parcel out that part of my identity. And so I was really looking to work with you to help me look for ways to branch out into a writing career and do those other kinds of things that as a psychologist, I'm not really doing.
Oh my gosh. And you've done it. Like just in the last few months, you took the bold step of starting a Substack that is very clearly not connected to your role as psychologist. This is a Substack where you write your ideas, you share your ideas. It was scary. It was risky. But listeners, like, let me tell you what, like, Lori came out of the gate swinging. I subscribed, obviously, right away, started getting email updates. And I think it was only like your second or third post on Substack that came into my inbox about busyness. It was this hot take on busyness. And I was just like, whoa, get out of the way. Lori is here. She has arrived. And these are some really powerful ideas that you're sharing on this platform. Lori, I mean, first of all, thank you for modeling for all of us the power of authentic self-expression and like really boldly sharing what you believe. How has it felt for you so far expressing more of your true ideas on Substack?
Well, thank you for that compliment. It really means a lot to me because I think there is a riskiness to doing that. And there have been times where I've been ready to hit publish on a post and thought, ooh, can I do this? But I think consistently what I've found is that Substack is the right place for me. It's the right community. And so it doesn't feel as scary, even as when I send my newsletter out to my psychology practice, which is a newsletter filled with other therapists and other people in the industry. But Substack feels like the right place, and that's made such a difference.
It really speaks to the power of when we're in the right place, on the right platform with the right people, that it's so much easier to share our bold ideas because we know there's going to be a little bit of safety in having those ideas received.
Absolutely. And I think the reception on Substack has been really warm. I'm finding my community there in a way that I certainly didn't on any other kind of social media or even other writing platforms. You know, there's something about the mix of people who are out there. They're my people. I'm one of them. And so it's very easy to share my voice with them.
Well, thank you for your service, sharing your voice with the world, and for sharing your voice with us today. So may we bring the spirit of authenticity and bold opinions into this conversation about busyness. Are you ready to dive in?
I am ready.
Okay, great. So busyness, Lori, gets a really bad rap, right? Especially in the more like anti-hustle culture, burnout recovery communities. It's like we've overcorrected around busyness. And now there's this sort of, it's in the zeitgeist of like, don't be busy, be less busy. So the prevailing belief is that busyness is problematic. I'm wondering if you can expand on that for us. Like, tell us about some of the most common justifications about why busyness is bad.
Right. Well, I think, like you said, there's a lot of reaction to the hustle culture, to the standards that capitalism holds people to, which is basically be busy until you're burned out and you collapse. And we're not expendable. Our energy isn't expendable. And so when I put out the message that busyness isn't bad, it has been met with some pushback that this is just a new way of justifying hustle culture and that capitalism preoccupation with productivity. And that's not at all what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm. And people have really rigid beliefs about what it means when you're busy. Let's talk a little bit about that, right? Like if I see you and you're really busy, then I can't, but my default judgments are that like I can make some assumptions about you, right? That, oh, you're busy. So that means what?
Yeah, you're a good person. You're living up that Protestant work ethic where you just keep being productive and doing the things and you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, all those myths that are foundational in American culture get activated. And we assume that busy people are more successful or more accomplished or even just more satisfied with their lives.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Sometimes that's true. Right? Sometimes it's true that busyness is bad, that like we are busy because we're kind of sucked into the byproduct of capitalism or hustle culture. Tell me a little bit about like when busyness is bad. And then after that, let's talk about when busyness really isn't that bad.
So I think busyness is a bad thing if it's coming out of difficulties with managing our lives. So that could be being in a work environment that is putting really high demands on us, and we don't know how to set boundaries or communicate our limits about what we're going to do. Or if we're really busy because we're struggling with a lack of skills around managing our time, managing a condition like anxiety or ADHD, then the busyness is a symptom of that other problem that's going on. I would say the busyness itself is not the disease. It's not what needs to be cured, if there's even such a thing as cure. But in these situations where it's something where we're lacking skills or we're lacking some kind of information that would be helpful to us, that's the piece that people need to address. And if they do that, then the busyness sorts itself out.
Okay. And we're going to come back to that in a minute, like when busyness is not a bad thing. But I really appreciate what you just said about busyness being a symptom of a larger problem in life or a larger challenge that we're going through in life. And what I'm really picking up on is that, really, I'm having this conversation with you and reading your post, and I'm trying to feel into my own body. Like, how can I create a barometer in myself to know when I'm bad busy versus when I'm good busy? I mean, I know that's too simplistic a way to think about it, but I want my body to learn to like read the signals so that I can kind of clue myself into moments when my busyness is a byproduct of something else. And I think about times when the busyness that I feel, there's an urgency behind it, and it's like fueled by fear and scarcity, right? Like I'm busy because I'm trying to make more money because I'm really afraid that, I'm not going to make enough, or I'm busy because I'm like going through some really hard stuff in life and I'm trying to outrun my grief. Like I'm staying busy to like avoid feeling hard feelings, or I'm staying busy because I don't know, like I think my dad will be prouder of me if he sees me like accomplishing all of these things versus, living life in a different pace. Am I getting this right? Is this kind of what you mean about like busyness being a symptom of something else?
Absolutely. I mean, I think those examples that you shared are great, because I think it's the way that busyness can be sort of sneaky. It seems to offer us that solution to the problem. So if we're feeling bad about ourselves, I'll just do more, and then I get more praise for that.
If I'm feeling bad about myself, I'm going to do more. That's pretty big. If I'm feeling bad about myself, I'm going to do more. Why? Why do we do that, Lori?
Because we get the appreciation and the attaboys, and sometimes it's the financial rewards or the promotion or the pride that somebody else takes in our accomplishments. And all of that feels good. It's really reinforcing. So instead of doing something about the fact that I feel stuck in my life, or I'm not feeling really confident, or I don't have the skills I need to handle a challenge, I just stay busy. Because it seems to work. It seems to give me what I need and want. But it's that false process.
Right. It's like, is my busyness helping me outrun a truth that I don't want to face or that I'm afraid to face? And if so, it's like the busyness, I feel like a victim too. I think maybe that's another feeling I get in my body when I'm bad busy. It's like I feel like I'm just a victim to my circumstances, right? I feel like I don't have the ability to say no. I don't have the ability to set boundaries. And that can be a cue for me that I need to go to the root. Don't solve the symptom, because if I just do less, nothing's actually going to change about the root struggle that's propelling me into these cycles of busyness and burnout in the first place. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So when we have that sense of urgency, or we have that sense of, I have to try to outrun this problem, I think those are great signs. The same with that trapped feeling, that victimized feeling that we have, the frantic energy that we can have. Like, I can't let myself not be busy because everything's going to collapse around me. That kind of vulnerability too. Those are all signs that the busyness is becoming problematic. And what we need is a deeper way of looking at our lives and taking stock.
Oof. Okay. I'm sure we're going to circle back to this more in this conversation. Like how do we discern when we're good busy or bad busy? That's a really important question. But I want to flip the coin to the other side now and talk about the good side of being busy. Because you say in your post that busyness doesn't have to be bad. And in fact, that sometimes choosing busyness can be a sign of a vibrant and complex life. Tell me more.
I think for many of us, we are sensitive, thoughtful people who care a lot about our relationships, about our place in the world, about what our legacy is and what we're building for our communities. And when we are choosing to be busy in support of those things that we value so deeply, that can be a really healthy, authentic, life-affirming choice that we're making. That it really is a matter of understanding what we value and being able to make choices that reflect that. And sometimes that means being busy to support all of those things that we care about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is where this conversation gets really interesting, right? That busyness as a byproduct of decisions that are deeply aligned with my values, with the way that I want to experience the world, that busyness can be delicious and rich and juicy. You talk in your article about how the common advice that we get is just to, again, just do less, just like say no. No is a complete sentence. I'm saying that in jest. I love that advice because it's true. But, we're spoon-fed this idea that if we just stop doing things, we'll start feeling better. And you say that isn't true. And in fact, you've experienced in your own life and with your clients that sometimes when people systematically start removing things from their life and doing less, things can feel worse. Tell us about what can happen if you are just removing things from your to-do list because you were told to be less busy.
I think that pressure to do less and be less busy is another obligation that is not always authentic for us. And when it's an obligation to show spaciousness in our schedule, look at my calendar, I only see people 3 days a week and I have all this time free. That's not necessarily doing anything for my sense of self, my belief in what the values are in my life. So I think we need to be really careful about asking ourselves, what am I creating this time for?
Yes, what am I creating this time for? If it's to just show everybody that, look, I created time, okay, like you're not going to feel different in your life just because you can show people your amazingly spacious calendar. In fact, like this whole practice that you and I are talking about is deeply personal. No one else needs to know. This isn't something that we need to publicize at all. So let's take it a step further then, Lori, and say, okay, so let's say someone does systematically remove things from their to-do list, and now all of a sudden they have this spaciousness. What should they do next?
I think there's a need to check in with their values around rest and spaciousness, because those can be values that we make choices around too. But I think then the follow-up is, if you're creating the spaciousness and rest, and presumably you're feeling energized to do something afterwards, then what aligns with your values? What really lights you up? Where's your passion? Where are your desires? What would you do if it gave you that boost to feel better about yourself and allowed you to understand your life as being more true to who you are?
Okay, this is great. Can you give us some examples in your own life, Lori, of choices you make that make you busy, but are so intentional and deeply aligned with your values?
Yeah. So one of the values that I really have is around family and around being a mom in a certain way. And so it's really important for me to support the things that my son is interested in. And I happen to have a son who, through no planning of his parents, is really successful as a taekwondoist. It is really cool. It's really strange for me because it holds no inherent appeal to me, but he loves it and he's very accomplished. He was the state champion this past season for his age group. So we spend a lot of time at the studio. We spend a lot of time driving him back and forth to camps and meets. And these things are important to him, and they're important to me because I want him to have these opportunities to do this and explore and develop himself in this way. And you could look at my life and say, why are you and your husband doing this? Why are you taking so much time, so many family resources for this? And ultimately, it's our value system. It's what's right for us. And so while I don't always love having to get up every evening and take my kid to something, it's okay to be busy in that way because it matters to me.
Because it matters to you. That intentional busyness, it fuels you in some way. It gives you something.
Yes, because it gives me that sense of like, I am living the vision of motherhood that I have, the motherhood that is supportive and invested in my child. And I would rather be doing that than having every evening to sit on my couch and do what? Scroll around on my phone? That's not, that wouldn't be right for me. Now, if that's right for somebody else, that's fine. Because this is so personal.
It is so personal. And I do think there's something really helpful for me, at least, in thinking about like bad busyness depletes me. Intentional busyness recharges me. And maybe it's fatiguing and I have to, all things in balance, of course. You can have too much of a good thing. But there is something about like the Taekwondo, it recharges you. It fuels something deeply meaningful inside of you. And I'm sure that there are times when you're also totally beat and fatigued. I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit. How do you know when you are getting to the precipice of like too much of a good thing?
I think it really is about tuning into my body. And I've gotten better at it over the years of just really paying attention to when is my body saying it's heavy, it's tired. When I wake up in the morning and I feel still tired and almost that same way that when you're coming down with the flu, you might feel sort of just achy and worn. Those are signs that even though the kind of busyness that I'm choosing is meaningful to me, I need to also value my physical health. I need to value maybe my mental health or my emotional health and do something else. So it's really this ongoing process of weighing all and balancing all of these different pieces. And that takes a lot of effort.
It takes a lot of space, time, intentionality. It really does. Like living an intentional life is effortful.
It is effortful. It consumes time.
It consumes time. Exactly. And this is where I feel like when we're at the very beginning of this process, we have to kind of reckon with a renegotiation of time in our lives. And maybe it just starts with like 5 minutes a day, like 5 minutes of really intentionally looking at your calendar, looking at your to-do list and asking yourself, like, what here fills me up and what depletes me? And is there a balance? And how can I create more balance? We have to start small. I started really small back in, 2016-ish when I first started exploring these ideas for myself. I just started in little tiny chunks and now my life looks completely different. And I do have the spaciousness and the time to be deeply intentional about how I live my life, but it didn't start that way. So I guess I want to say that for people listening who like what we're talking about sounds like a pipe dream. Like that'll never be me. I mean, if I would have listened to this conversation 10 years ago, I guarantee you I probably would have stopped listening already and I would have rolled my eyes and I would have said, well, you must be nice to be you because I don't have that luxury in my life. I don't have that privilege in my life. Lori, what do you want to say to people listening right now who are having that really resistant, kind of combative reaction to this conversation?
I think that combative, resistant reaction is a sign that this is probably something that those people really want. But, I really wanted it 10 years ago too. And it's taken a long time to get here. So I think first acknowledging that, yes, you want this and it feels very far off. It feels like maybe it's impossible. Maybe you don't think you have a job that you could do in a more flexible way, or maybe your values seem to conflict. And how do you do both things? Or how do you do a handful of things that are really important to you but seem to conflict? But I think allowing yourself to start right where you're at with these small intentional decisions around where are places that I have some control? What can I do that serves my needs, my values, my desires for what busyness or rest could look like? And then start there and allow yourself some time to unfold.
I want to see if, I know we're like really putting ourselves on the spot here, but I want to see if we can brainstorm some really specific examples, Lori, because sometimes these conversations are too philosophical and like I can't grip it when I'm listening. I want people listening to this right now to really be able to see themselves in this process. So you want to play a game with me?
Sure.
Okay, let's play a game. So let's say that there's a single mom listening to this episode, and let's just say like she has a private practice and she's also working part-time on the side at a group practice because she needs to pay the bills. So she is like maxed out. She's working, I don't know, she's seeing like 30, 35 clients a week, kind of like juggling private practice and the group practice expectations. She's, raising this kid solo, trying to be the best mom she can be. Where can she start?
I think she can start with just some self-compassion for all of the demands that are on her. I grew up in a single mom household. My mom raised my brother and I by herself, and it's a tremendous amount of work. Anytime my husband goes out of town, I'm like, wow, I forgot how hard this is to have it all on myself. And I'm lucky I don't have that all the time. So starting with huge amounts of self-compassion, and then some grounded look at what the realities are. So maybe it's not about changing anything about how many hours she's working. And maybe it's not about making any changes to how she parents or what she's doing, but maybe it's looking at what is she doing with the rest of her time? And is there something that she might want to do differently or might want to change? So maybe she has a habit of doing something around the house that she's just done always and maybe doesn't want to continue to do the way that she's done. For me, it was very liberating years ago to sort of realize I don't care all that much about what my yard looks like. I'm lucky I don't live in an HOA, so, we aren't under external pressure to make our yard look a certain way. So I don't have it as fancy as some other people might have. The plants that I have are all low maintenance things.
I love that.
And that was intentional, and it took time too. But that might be the kind of thing that even that, multi-jobbed single mom might be able to consider doing. Is there some kind of trick like that?
So that's like the first step, right? I mean, the first step is self-compassion and if you're listening to this and you're not a single mom, but you are burdened by life in some other way, like fill in the blank. How are you burdened by life? Okay, listen to this advice from Lori through that lens. And the first step is meet yourself with so much love and compassion because life is fucking hard and you are struggling and that is real. And we will never record a podcast and be like, well, I mean, just like let life be easy, just like let it be easy. No, it's not easy. It's really hard. So meet yourself with self-compassion. And then step 2, if you will, look at what you're giving time and attention to in your life right now that could be less complicated or less time consuming. So this is one of those places where we are trying to remove something from the busyness list. So let's say that this mom does that. My sister is a school teacher. She does live in an HOA. And a couple years ago, she replaced all of the quote, mandatory landscaping in her front yard with artificial plants because she just did not. It was just like what you're saying. She was like, this is something I don't want to give my time to. So she filled it all in with artificial plants. So let's say that the mom in this example does that. She fills in the yard with artificial plants. She doesn't have to worry about that anymore. Let's move on to step 3. What could she replace? She now has an empty kind of time slot on her weekly schedule. What questions would you ask to help guide her around how to use that time now?
I would start with questions of what makes you feel lighter? What allows you to be curious? Or what connects you to something you used to enjoy when your life was less full. Maybe it was when you were a kid or you weren't working this way. But I think starting to explore a little bit of that idea of what might be pleasurable, what might be exciting. And you could start with as little as a couple minutes. Just if you free up 5 minutes in your schedule, maybe you're not doing the thing, but maybe you're just allowing yourself to connect with those emotions around, boy, I used to really like doing this hobby, or I really want to travel and I'm going to look at a travel blog and read one article for that 5 minutes, whatever it is.
This is such great guidance. And I believe this with every ounce of my body, Lori. Like, look to what gives you pleasure. Look to what sparks your curiosity, your imagination, your energy. I love these reflective questions you're offering about, like, think about yourself as a kid. What did you love to do? How did you play? Right? For me, rest is anything I do that regulates me and recharges my batteries. And often it requires adding something to the calendar, adding something to the to-do list. This is a really great example of where busyness becomes a superpower, right? Choosing busyness, being intentionally, thoughtful about how you're spending your time. Instead of spending that 5 minutes doing yard maintenance on a Tuesday, I'm going to take an extra 5 minutes in a steaming hot shower, right? Or I'm going to take that 5 minutes to curate a playlist and dance in the living room. Whatever you can do to connect to yourself, to energize you, be busy. Do as much of that as you possibly can, because it's going to lead to, as you say, a more vibrant and complex life, which is what most of us really want. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we do that experiment, when we take that 5 minutes and we use it differently, if we take 15 seconds afterwards and check in with ourselves, how was that? Do I feel more of what I want? Do I feel rested, energized, curious, satisfied, fulfilled, eager for more? Then we know we're on the right track with what we've replaced it.
Yes, the compass is pointing north at that point, right? And like follow the breadcrumbs in that direction and let it take as much time as it takes. Okay, so there's something personal coming up for me right now that I want to share with you. It's like really just crystallizing in my mind. So maybe it's not a great idea to share it in a podcast interview, but whatever, we're going to go for it. I realized the other day, so I used to do theater, and it brought me so much joy, so much connection, creative energy, fill in the blank. And I realized the other day, thanks to a Facebook memory, that it's been 10 years this summer since I did my last show. First of all, that blew my mind because it feels like it was like 5 days ago. You know what I mean? And I was like, whoa, wow, it's been 10 years. That's crazy. And so I've been reflecting a little bit about why. Because throughout those 10 years, there have definitely been times when I've been like, I really miss doing theater. I want to go back to that. I want to find a place to go do a show. And every time I shut myself down because I say, I'm just too busy. Doing shows takes a lot. It's a lot. It's very time consuming for a short amount of time, like say like 2 months, it's like takes all your time, all your free time. And I've said to myself, like, it's just too much time. I'm already busy. I would be too busy. It would overwhelm me. I can't do it. But right now, having this conversation with you, it's just making me slow that down a little bit and go, well, wait a minute. Would the more values aligned life choice right now be for me to say no to a couple other things that take up time on my list so that I can say yes to this really time-consuming activity that would make me really busy for a couple of months? Like, oh, I need to think about this because I have been just default saying no through this conditioning that being busy is bad.
Or even through the conditioning that whatever we've chosen to be busy with, we have to continue choosing to be busy with. So, you've been out of theater for 10 years. You've filled that time. It can be hard to say, I want to uproot that. I want to do something different. But it doesn't have to be an impossible obstacle to overcome.
And it really is like the reframe of this conversation about choosing busyness, being intentionally busy in ways that are value aligned, that is shaking that up for me a little bit. So thanks, Lori. I'm going to keep you posted. I recommend everyone start a podcast so you can get free therapy from your friends. Okay, great. Thanks for witnessing that personal process. I think we could all stand to take a big pause in our day, in our life, in our week, in our quarter, like however it makes sense to you, and really do some honest self-evaluation around like, where is my time going? Where is my energy going? Am I choosing it? Am I not choosing it? Is it energizing me? Is it depleting me? What's within my control? What can I shift? And how can I start really small and let this be a process that expands and unfolds in my life over time? Such beautiful wisdom, Lori. I have one more question for you about busyness. It's really easy to compare, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier. Like, it's really easy to be like, well, how much free time do you have? And then to judge myself in comparison to you or to my business partner or my clients or my mom or whatever, fill in the blank. We've talked today about how this is a deeply personal process, and I really can't measure my life, my busyness, my schedule against anyone else's. I want to know what advice you have for people who are really stuck in the comparison trap, comparing my life to someone else's life. What do you want to say to me about that, Lori?
Well, first, I will say I am very, very good at putting myself in the comparison trap. It comes really easily to me. And that tendency plus perfectionism are a real prescription for feeling uncomfortable. But all that being said, when we can set those things aside, my busyness is none of your business.
Ooh-wee.
And your busyness is none of mine. It is way too personal. It involves things that even your therapist may not fully know about you and understand about your calculations.
My busyness is none of your business, and your busyness is none of my business. That's a bold statement. How do people tend to react when you share that idea with them?
Sometimes people get offended because I think we live in a culture where we've become really comfortable commenting about everything about other people, and so it's just an extension of that sense that we can comment on somebody's body or income or life choices or diet or whatever. But I think it's also the kind of statement that I use because it's so fundamentally true that it shakes us when we hear it. It is truly none of my business.
It's truly none of your business. And listen, I'm guilty of making it my business in the past, for sure. I mean, especially when I first started coaching business owners, I would say that I was really quick to kind of look at their life and say, well, you're too busy. You got to back off. You got to do less. And now I can really see that for what it was, which was an overly simplistic way of trying to make sense of our lives in late stage capitalism. Like, oh, if only it were that simple to be like, oh, I can just look at what's on your schedule and tell you exactly why you're burnt out or exactly why you're struggling. You're too busy. It's overly simplistic. And it's none of my business how you're spending your time, how you're living your life. The better question is, are you happy? Do you feel in alignment with your purpose? Is your business prospering? Like, these are the questions I want to know the answer to, because they can help point me as a guide in the direction of, supporting you and course correcting. As a friend, maybe the only question is like, how can I bring more joy and love to your life? And I can just stay out of it altogether if I think someone is too busy or doing too much. I mean, it's a big idea, and it's a gentle and loving slap in the face that I think we all need.
Yeah. And like I said, I am definitely guilty of needing that myself as well.
Your busyness is none of my business, and my busyness is none of your business. Whew, and let's all stop comparing and really take the time to assess through inquiry. Am I spending my time in a way that aligns with my values? Is it making me feel better, or is it making me feel worse? Proceed from there. Wow. Lori, thank you for sharing these incredible thoughts and ideas with us here on the Deeply Rested podcast. I want to end this conversation circling back to where we started, right? So here you are, Lori, a psychologist who is breaking the mold, and you are stepping out of your comfort zone. You're stepping into a new, more expansive platform so that you can say all of this without any concern for what the licensure board might say or think. And you've done it. I mean, you posted, go to Lori's Substack and read this post about, I think it's actually called My Busyness is None of Your Business. Read it. Lori, what I want to know now is what's it been like for you these last few months as you've been really showing up in the world in a more authentic way?
It's been wonderful. I really think it's been so personally and professionally beneficial to me to give more space to these ideas, to be able to have a more full voice and explore the parts of myself that are increasingly important. It's not that being a psychologist isn't important to me. It's that there are other things that I am curious about and passionate about and want to give voice to. And so having that ability to balance both of those things right now is good. Objectively, I am way busier than I was 6 months ago. I am working more, and it doesn't feel like work because it's what I want to be doing. It gives me energy. It excites me. I feel enthusiasm for getting to talk with people like you about this and really give myself to these opportunities to build this other business.
Lori, this is so incredible. I'm so proud of you, first of all. I want to ask you in a second, putting a pin in this, about have there been any consequences, right? Have you gotten any kickback as you've been doing this? But before, I just want to highlight what you just said. You're actually working more now than you were before. And years ago, when I first started business coaching, every coach I was working with said, Maegan, the only way you're going to make money in this business is if you sell people the solution to work less and earn more. And I ran with that for several years. It was one of my core marketing messages, work less, earn more. And the deeper I got into the work, into my own work and to work with clients, the more I realized that's a lie. That's a lie. And I have to stop spreading that lie, because actually what's happening is that as we become more aligned with our purpose, with our true selves, we start working more than ever before, but in a completely different way, right? Just like what you're saying, like, whoa, all of a sudden, like I am working Saturday mornings and I love it, and I feel so fired up, and it's like the work is flowing out of me, and there's so much ease and there's so much creativity, and I'm putting so much more into it, including time. And that's a really beautiful thing that I think totally aligns with intentional busyness, a life that is vibrantly busy. Thank you for saying that, Lori.
Yeah, it's so different than times in my life where maybe I've worked, multiple jobs just for financial survival, or I've worked in community mental health and had a caseload of 100 people and worked 50, 60 hours a week. That is not the kind of busyness I want to have again in my life. That is busyness for someone else's goals or desires or values. This busyness is fine because I'm enjoying it. It's vibrant. And sometimes it is just fine. Sometimes it's just the things that come up in life. I've had to take my car into the garage 3 times in 4 weeks. It wasn't fun. And I would have rather be doing something else. Scrolling my phone mindlessly instead of running to the garage would have been fine. But I think when we make choices for ourselves and on the whole, we are doing the kinds of things that our values align, then it's easier to sort of absorb the energy of those nuisances.
Absorbing the energy of the nuisances, to have the capacity to absorb the energy of the nuisances. Okay, we'll have to save that for a whole other conversation later. Quickly, because I want to make sure we're being so like brutally honest about every angle of this conversation. Has there been kickback, fallout, consequences as you've shared more of yourself?
Yeah, I think one of the big consequences is that there are people who just don't agree with me, that they have very different political beliefs or economic beliefs, and they have self-selected to move on from my Substack or from my professional orbit. And that's okay. It hasn't caused any damaging rifts in my personal relationships, because I think I show up pretty honestly there. But I think there are consequences to this. There are people in my life who don't agree with the choices that I'm making or want to see me work in a certain way, in a very narrowly prescribed, this is what psychologists do, that aligns with their values and not mine.
Lori, what do you want to say to all of the people listening who are really afraid to do this? Like, they are afraid to break the mold. They're afraid to show up more authentically in the world. What do you want to say to them?
Start small. That for me has been the biggest key. I've been starting small for years. Like, I've been growing in this direction for years. Much like, you plant a seed and sometimes it looks like it's never going to flower. And then suddenly you wake up one morning and it has a bud. And then the next morning that flower is open. I'm at that stage with you where the bud was already set. It was ready to open. And so you got to come into this process, Maegan, where I was so ready to go. But behind that was all the years of the small, steady progress. But every time I look back on it, all of those little steps that I made, they felt good in my body. They gave me energy. They brightened my life. How could I not follow them?
Lori, that's such beautiful advice. And I agree with you so deeply. I think about it in my own life. It's like, follow the breadcrumbs. And often it is just a breadcrumb, right? And you just pick it up, you put it in your mouth, you can barely taste it. It feels so tiny and small. But then there's another and another and another. And then something happens and the floodgates open and whoosh, transformation washes in. And it happens in a flourish. And it's a little bit dramatic. And maybe some things have to burn down around us to make space for the emerging parts of ourselves. And that's a beautiful process. And Lori, it's been such an honor to be with you in your process and to witness you stepping so fully into authenticity and self-expression. And the world is a better place because of this conversation, because of your ideas about busyness and intentionality. And I am so grateful to you for sharing them with us here on this podcast.
I am so grateful for all you've done and been in my life so far, and I'm glad to be the part of this audience.
Can you, Lori, please tell the people where they can go to follow your work?
Yes, you can follow me on Substack. The name of my Substack is Singularly Sensitive.
So you can go to substack.com/@singularlysensitive to subscribe to Lori's newsletter. I highly recommend that you do it because her stuff is incredible. Lori, thank you for being here. Let's get off this call and go be busy.
All right. Sounds great, Maegan. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Deeply Rested. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love to invite you to join the Deeply Rested weekly newsletter. You can sign up at deeplyrested.com/newsletter. I hope to meet you in my inbox very soon.